Hi, and welcome to our sixth objective, where we're going to talk about automatic stabilizers, or sometimes called non-discretionary. The reason is that the government really doesn't have control over them, as they are indexed to inflation, means that they increase or decrease as inflation increases and decreases. So let me go ahead and share my screen with you. Here we are. Okay, so we're going to explain some of these automatic stabilizers. So what are they? Automatic stabilizers, sometimes we call them things which are indexed to inflation. And things that are indexed to inflation would be transfer payments. For example, Medicare are indexed to inflation. So the big deal is that they automatically change levels in order to stabilize contraction and expansion. So kind of trying to ensure that the contractions are not as great when they could be, if not for these automatic stabilizers, and or these expansions are not too rapid, if not for these automatic stabilizers. They're just one thing of many that we look at. Okay, some examples of automatic stabilizers. One is the tax system. In recessions, taxes will fall automatically, which is kind of interesting when you think about it. But in a recession, people have less aggregate demand. So when we look at it, taxes will go down. So when taxes go down, then people will spend more, consumption will increase, hence stimulating aggregate demand. Government spending is another one. More people will apply for assistance. So for example, when the unemployment rate increases beyond the natural rate, we're going to see things like an increase in government spending. And that increase in government spending likewise will stimulate aggregate demand. So aggregate demand in both instances are going to shift outward. These are automatic. No one has to, other than individuals, apply for these kinds of things. No one has to go to Congress and the House and get these things approved. Okay, so the government does have a budget, and they set the budget, the Congressional Budget Office, or the CBO. And you can look that up if you'd like. The Congressional Budget Office is what determines the budget for the year. So when we think about it, remember that the taxes coming in are where the government gets its revenue, and the government spending going out. So taxes to the government are a positive, government spending is a negative. If the tax expenditures, so the government revenues, you can think of that as taxes, are greater than expenditures, then we're going to have a budget surplus. And we have had budget surpluses, all but during, I think the last one was the Clinton administration, where we actually brought in more taxes than we spent. A budget deficit is what we hear about a lot. And this is where the taxes that we're bringing in to the government are less than the government spending. So here, government spending is greater than the tax revenue that they're bringing in. And then this creates a shortfall, okay, which in a deficit is a short-term idea. Debt is a longer-term idea, which we're going to talk about in some upcoming objectives. So basically what happens, how does this all relate back to real GDPs? Because again, we're looking at aggregate demand here and this increase in aggregate demand. If we have an increase in real GDP, then basically taxes are going to increase because there will be more earnings as a result. By earnings, I mean corporate. I'm just going to use that example. Earnings will go up. So the taxes collected on said earnings will go up, and government transfer payments, G, keep my little terms consistent, will decrease because more people are working because we had this increase in real GDP. As a result, the budget surplus will help to offset some of that inflation. So because taxes increased, and government spending decreased, we had a budget surplus. The opposite can also be true. If we have a decrease in aggregate demand, where aggregate demand here is shifting inward, above it was shifting outward, then what happens is tax collections will fall because earnings have decreased. So lower corporate income taxes, lower earnings overall. So taxes will decrease. Some people may have lost their jobs because the inward shift of aggregate demand. So that means that government will have more transfer payments like unemployment and so on. And then that will provide a budget deficit, and that will offset some of the inflationary components because here taxes are less than government spending. Okay, so here's an example. This is government spending and taxes. So this is the government spending, which is an outflow to the government, taxes being an inflow. And here we have the equilibrium. Okay, so this is trillions of dollars over here on the y-axis, and we have real GDP here on the x-axis. Right here, we're in equilibrium where we have a balanced budget. And that's kind of what we're always shooting for when we put the budget together, but things happen, natural disasters, so on. So on this side of the equation, what we see is that taxes are less than government spending. So if you just take, say, 12 here, work your way up, taxes would be 1 trillion, whereas government spending would be 2 trillion. So on this side of the graph, there we go, we will have a budget deficit. On the opposite side of the graph, we would have a budget surplus because those taxes, which are a positive to the government, are greater than the spending of the government. And we try to say, hey, let's shoot for here for a balanced budget. But things happen, right? Okay, what conclusion can we make from these automatic stabilizers? Well, they do help offset some of the recession when, again, we have 2 consecutive downturns of real GDP, and they help to offset inflation when GDP expands, a recovery. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me. And I look forward to seeing you in the next objective. Thanks.